Hi, everybody. I'm Jeanie LoVetri, and this is my show, Our Vocal Universe. Welcome. This is a show about voice, all kinds of voice, singing, speaking, expression of all kinds. And we want you to know that voice is important, and your voice is important. I am very lucky to have a wonderful guest for us today. We have a fine singer who has come to visit us from Philadelphia, where he lives. He has had quite a bit of experience. He originated the role of Mr. Webb in the world premiere of Ned Warum's Our Town. And he has also recently played Stanley Kowalski in an operatic version of A Streetcar Named Desire, which was written by Andre Previn. He's played Emile de Beck in South Pacific, that's the lead. And he's also played the lead in Sweeney Todd as Sweeney at Kane Park. He is originally from Ohio, and currently he's teaching in Philadelphia at the University of the Arts, and also here in New York. He has quite a few students on Broadway and in national tours. So I am very happy to welcome Benjamin Sarnona. Hi, Benjamin.
Well, hello, Jeanie. It is an honor to be here.
I'm so glad you're here to join us. I have
Me
all
too.
kinds of questions about you I want to ask and share with our audience. You are now a professional singer, but I want to know how you got started. What happened in your young days that led you into music and singing?
Well, you know, if you trust my parents, which I do, I've been loud and vocal pretty much right out of the womb.
Yeah.
But in terms of actually being in front of people, my first memory, I was thinking about it because you asked, somewhere about second grade, I was the professor in Wackadoo Zoo at my elementary school.
Wackadoo Zoo.
Wackadoo Zoo.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was hooked. You know, I did Oliver very soon after that, and then on the classical side of things, I auditioned for the Cleveland Orchestra's children's chorus. Cleveland Orchestra is really a fine
Yes.
Ensemble, and for at least a handful of years, I got to, ring out my boy soprano until things dropped and I had to sort of move on.
Yeah, but that's a great opportunity because that's a fine organization, and not every kid gets that opportunity. So then what?
Well, then, I sort of continued on doing some theatrical stuff, but I got bit by the singer-songwriter band bug. I picked up the guitar. I started writing songs because I realized that it wasn't a bad way to woo women. And that took me pretty much all the way through high school. But I was singing in show choir and all the other sort of, really any opportunities that came my way.
I could see you playing the guitar, wooing Juliet there. That must have been fun.
Absolutely.
So then you went to college.
I did. And
I know you also are a pianist, so where
Right.
did that work in?
Right. So piano started pretty much at the same time that voice did. In my wooing days, I dropped the piano for the guitar in terms of training, but it was always there with me. And so when it came time to start undergraduate studies, I actually started as a piano primary music education major. So teaching was always somewhere on my radar screen as well. But I took secondary voice lessons. It was required of all of us at my alma mater, Baldwin Wallace, just south of Cleveland. And I had never taken formal voice lessons before. And I found out very quickly that I could be loud, but also cultivated, at least to a certain level. And I started hearing
Nicely loud.
Nicely loud, And I heard Robert Merrill, and I heard Jussi Björling, and I heard John Vickers, and all of these singers that just really sort of captured my fancy, and I was just excited about doing it, and that took me all the way through grad school, really.
Okay. Well, I want the audience to know that those are very famous opera singers, and that were very well known both in the United States and in other countries, and so certainly excellent role models if you were going to follow somebody. Those are good people to follow. And when we speak of voice lessons, we're also speaking of singing lessons. In the United States, those two terms are the same, but in the European culture, voice lessons usually means speaking voice training, and they call it singing lessons when it is singing. But here we use the term interchangeably. So you went to college and you finished, and then how did you end up being a professional in terms of performing in operas or concerts after school?
Right. Well, I was actually fortunate enough to do some professional work while I was in college. I went to Indiana University, and their productions are of a scale, a magnitude that a lot of regional opera companies know. If you've done a role there, you're probably ready to do it at a sort of small regional level. And so I started there doing roles that I had done at IU, and then I went out to various places in the Midwest and whatnot. And then when I graduated, I came back to Cleveland. Now, I had picked up, in Cleveland, I had started teaching pretty quickly, actually also at my alma mater, Baldwin Wallace, but started singing as well. And there's a fine regional theater in Cleveland now called Cleveland Opera Theater, and I've been fortunate enough to do a good many roles there, including Stanley Kowalski in Streetcar.
Well, we're going to see a little bit about that, but let's talk about it first.
Sure.
Most of us know that Tennessee Williams wrote the play, and Marlon Brando famously played it in the movie. What did you think it was like to play that famous role as an operatic voice?
Right. Well, from an operatic standpoint, it's sort of the next part of this of my story, which is good. Stanley provided a wonderful opportunity for me to marry two things that I was excited about. One of which was theater. It was probably the most. I mean, it was in English, so that helps.
Right.
But it was the most honest-to-goodness theatrical role I had ever done in an operatic context.
Right.
And I had reached a point in my own singing where I was really ready for a little bit of a shift in focus, I would say. I'd had years and years and years of what I would call resonance or sound or production-based focus.
Right.
And with the absolute permission of the stage director and the conductor, with Stanley, I was able to really treat it as, I would say, more resonant music theater, in the sense that it's not necessarily about how much sound can I put out,
Right.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. The audience needs to know that opera is still pretty much, in the United States, unamplified, meaning that a person who's singing in an opera has to fill the whole theater just on their own lung power. And they need to learn how to generate a maximum amount of sound as comfortably and efficiently as possible, which a lot of vocal training is aimed toward. So the sound output for its own sake can become an important aspect of training. But a lot of us who are trained like that feel the way Benjamin does, which is that we want to communicate something more than just being sound makers. So we're going to take a look now at an excerpt. This is a scene where Stanley is talking to Stella, his wife, who's pregnant, and the scene is toward the end of the opera, right? You want to tell us a little more about what that is?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the entirety of the opera for me is about Stanley and Blanche living under one roof. These are two very disparate or clashing personalities. Starts out almost okay. By the time we get to this scene, things are really, really not okay. And what you're seeing is the confrontation between between Stanley and a very, very, very pregnant Blanche. Sorry, forgive me, Stella.
Right.
And referring back to what things were like before her sister was in, and how good things were. Don't you remember? And let's see if we can get back to that.
Right. So if you're not familiar with the play, Stella has a sister who has come to stay with them in this small apartment, and that has created some tension. So here's our first scene from Streetcar Named Desire with Benjamin as Stanley Kowalski.
And I put you down of them counts, and how you loved it, oh, you loved it. Wasn't we happy together? Wasn't it all okay till she showed here? Wasn't we happy? Wasn't it all okay? Wasn't it? Hey, what is the What's the matter, baby?
Wow, well, that's kind of an impressive scene. And that's really a very, well, I don't know, I was going to say moving element where you really have to go from being very passionate to being more tender.
Right. Well, and I think that's actually important. I think there's an element of Stanley that is childish, maybe in more ways than one. We think of him as a brute, but
Right.
underneath it, there's this very vulnerable individual, and Stella is really the only one that seems to be able to assuage his feelings of angst or
Right.
or insecurity or whatever it is. So when we see him, see her in pain, having to head to the hospital, I think we see some real tenderness there, and I think that's important.
Yeah, and I think that as a vocalist, to be able to make those kinds of changes is really important. And unfortunately, we don't get that enough in some performances, and then after a while, it feels like people are just singing at you instead of singing to you.
Yeah.
And it can be a turnoff. And it was really nice to see that you were very alive in that segment. So now the next thing I want to talk to you about a little bit is the other kinds of stuff that you do. Tell me a little bit about your teaching. Right now you're teaching at the University of the Arts. What do you do there? What's that like?
Sure. Well, backing up just a little bit, I mean, I started teaching in grad school. I was an associate instructor and was able to work with people pretty early on.
And you're talking about now teaching singing or piano or both?
Teaching singing specifically.
Okay.
Yeah, and pretty much right out of the gate, specifically music theater. I had an interest in it from early on, and you'll find anybody who goes out into the world of teaching, your interests often tend to cause other people to gravitate towards you and whatnot. And so I started there, and then I had 10 wonderful years, as I said, teaching at my alma mater, also almost exclusively music theater. Yeah. Then after 10 years of adjunct work there, I was ready for what I considered to be sort of a next step for me, which was sort of taking over an entire department and looking at what it would be like to say, after this much time, these are the fundamentals that I think need to be present in the training of music theater artists, and this is a way that we can sort of codify what is done across various studios, different teachers with very different personalities and different approaches, so that we're all working towards the same end.
Yeah, that's really important because individual voice lessons can be so different from one teacher to another and can be confusing to a student because one teacher will say do this and the next teacher says no, don't do this.
Right.
So having an overview in a department, I think, is really important.
Right. Right.
Do we want to talk about other kinds of ways to sing besides music theater?
Well, sure. Well, I think particularly nowadays, music theater, I won't say it comprises every way that you could possibly sing, but it certainly involves a lot of them.
Right.
It's very different than training in the 60s or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And I talk about. It's probably an oversimplification to say that I was trained to make a particular sound, but in the classical world, that is kind of it. You need to be able to make a certain kind of sound, or you're not going to make it.
Well, you can't.
Right?
You have to fill the house with your voice.
Right.
If you can't do that, they don't want you no matter whatever else is going on.
Right, right. Now, in music theater, particularly now with the advent of better and better microphone systems, right? We don't have that resonant component anymore, which opens the door for just the absolute gamut of musical styles, which gets to what's, to me, so exciting about training for music theater, because you can say, okay, I am a singing actor, and I have this functional access to my voice, this range of sounds, high, low, light, soft, dark, however you want to describe them.
Yep.
And then I take, maybe with a voice teacher, but perhaps in conjunction with a coach, I say, I have this access. Now I need to inform that access by an understanding of style and of character and of all of these other things.
Right. And each one of those components is in itself a discipline that you have to learn and you have to get used to, and then you got to put them together.
Yeah.
And that takes me to our next clip.
Uh-oh.
So we're now going to hear a folk song. Would you call it a folk song?
Oh, I would.
Pop song?
Yeah, I would say country rock.
Okay. So it's fairly well known and is a story song. And we're going to play that because it sounds really different.
Desperado, why don't you come to your senses? You've been out riding fences so long now. Oh, your heart one, I know that you got your reasons. These things that are pleasing you can hurt you somehow. Don't you try Queen of Diamonds, boy. She'll beat you if she's able. You know the Queen of Hearts is always your best bet. Now it seems to me some fine things have been laid upon your table, but you only want the ones that you can't get. Desperado.
Wow. So that's not your opera voice.
No.
Not at all. What do you have to do to make it sound so different?
Yeah. So what's interesting about this clip, I mean, it's an Eagles song. It's Don Henley, which is one of the most, Don Henley to me is one of the most just clear and pure rock singers that I can think of. And, you know, as I was trying to figure out what I was going to sing for this program on an institute that I've been able to be at 1 year. This is my second year. It's called the LoVetri Institute for Somatic Voice Work at my alma mater, Baldwin Wallace. And I knew I wanted to do something contrasting to my classical work. And what I asked myself was, there's got to be a song that as a kid you loved. And so I sort of dusted off all my old CDs and started listening, and I found Desperado. And I started singing along and sort of rediscovering this 16-year-old that just loved to sit with his guitar and, you know, emote.
Right, right.
And obviously, you know, this clip is on piano, but there's something to taking, it was a really beautiful experience actually, to be able to take an understanding of the way the body works in terms of breathing, in terms of, let's say, you know, prepping a vocal track so you're not carrying a lot of tenseness into it,
Right.
but not really messing with it much beyond that, and basically saying, I'm just going to approach this language in the most simple way I know how, and what comes out can't be wrong.
Right. Well, that's what I call plain vanilla singing.
Sure.
Right? You're just letting your voice be very natural. You're not trying to generate any special energy other than sing the notes and make the words meaningful. And some people think that as opera singers, you shouldn't do that it's dangerous or harmful to your opera singing. Do you feel that way?
No. You know, a discovery that I made, not that I was the first one to think of it, but it was a big realization to me that pop and rock singing was actually lighter than classical singing. I had it in my head that these rock singers must be just totally killing themselves, and
Well, some of them are, and
of course,
that's not so good.
Well, sure. But to make the sounds, I assume they must be louder, they must be heavier, they must be all these things. And what I learned was that actually, in order to sing these styles well, I actually really had to lighten up my production.
Right.
And so I found an ease that has actually then informed my classical singing in a really positive way.
Yeah, so kids, you got that? If you want to be an opera singer, you're not supposed to scream and turn yourself into a monster voice by pushing. You got to figure out the best, easiest, light way to do it. And I think that's really, that's a good point for us to make here, is that when you use your voice intelligently, you can do all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
And that's part of this point of this program, is for people to value their voices, get to know them, get to learn them, get to learn what they do, and then find all these wonderful outlets that allow us to explore all kinds of stuff. And that actually takes me to the question of, if we do have any young viewers who are watching us, and they think, oh gosh, I'd like to be a singer, what should I do? Do you have some advice?
Sure. On the practical level, I would just simply say, get out and start singing. Sing anytime you can. Sing it if you're in high school. Look into your choirs. You know, look into being in a rock band like I was, or pick up a guitar and start writing songs or whatever it is. Just get yourself going. And then if you sense that it really is a direction that you're passionate about, find a teacher that is functionally based. And what I mean by that is a teacher that is really going to work with you on the way that the voice is actually working, and not so much put sound as an end in itself. And along those lines, I think having people that you emulate, that's the opposite of what I wanted to say. People that you respect and that inspire you is so important. You know, right out of the gate, I mean, I cried when Freddie Mercury died. I mean, and not that far off with Luciano and et cetera. So I think it's very, very important to have these people that inspire you to sing. However, I think it is also equally important that you not fall into the trap of thinking, wow, Ramin Karimloo is amazing. If I want to sing well, I have to sound like that.
Right, that's a trap.
Find a teacher that is going to work with you to discover what you actually sound like. And the good news is you're not going to be disappointed. What you sound like in your freest form is going to be more exciting than your imitation of anybody.
That's right. It's always a discovery process to figure out, who am I as a voice? And that doesn't reveal itself immediately. It takes a lot of exploring and trying and doing, and you want to work with a singing teacher who helps you enjoy the exploration, even if it's challenging, and sometimes it can be quite challenging or difficult, but that you understand that there's a reason why, and that it's not to make you feel bad, because then you don't want to study with somebody like that.
Right.
And the advice I always want to give people is that we now know a lot more about the voice than when I was young. When I was a student, there's so much more information about function, as you say, how the vocal cords work and how the larynx functions and how the breathing works. And you want to have a teacher who understands those things and hasn't made up some crazy ideas about making the sound do funny things.
Sure.
And it's nice to know that your program at school is going in the direction of grounded in function and science and integrating expression and art.
Absolutely.
So now that we've solved all the problems of the vocal world, is there anything else that is in the present moment? Are you doing any other kind of performing? I think you have a project with your wife, right?
Well, I do. This has been really kind of an exciting thing for me. My wife has degrees in both theater and history, but then has a heart for working with the geriatric community. So and I think this is kind of how life works. I've sort of had the opportunity to sit with her. I have a degree in music theory as well, actually, I should say, and arranged this one-woman show that incorporates music throughout the 40s and 50s and 60s. I play. She has written a delightful script, and we've already taken it to 2 places already, and it's been received wonderfully well. And
Nice.
And it's really an honor to get to a point where something that I don't really feel like I earned my voice. It was sort of something that I discovered and realized was sort of always there on some level or another, despite some of my best efforts to try and make it something I don't even know.
Yeah.
And when you get to the point where you've discovered it and you're then able to share that with others, I think it's an opportunity unlike most others.
That's great. So I want to thank Benjamin for being with us today, and I want to thank you for being with us today. We want you to enjoy your own voice and get to know it. We hope that you will continue to watch our show and that you will tune in for other really interesting guests. Thank you so much for coming, and see you soon.